everyone. In this episode, I'm going to share about crankbait. So a lot of people think that a crankbait basically is a lure that is like fat, round, and have a big diving lip. But that is not exactly true. So what is actually a crankbait? Simply a crankbait, you can just say that any lure with a diving lip that gets your lure diving under the water, that actually is a crankbait in general. So I'm going to share with you first the different kind of crankbait. Okay, number one, we talk about the sizes. We have body size of a crankbait that is like big. The body size can be even up to 10 centimeter, 9 centimeter, as well as that the body size can be as small as even 3 centimeter, 4 centimeter, which sometimes I myself like to call this very small body crankbait, mini crankbait. So the sizes alone has quite a big range, and then we go into the diving depth. So basically when you look at the lure, if you see that the lip is big, it's going to dive pretty deep because more water surface or water pressure is on that lip, the surface itself, and then this will bring the lure down deeper. And of course the towing point itself will affect, plus the angle of the lip, that will more or less affect the diving depth. But just a simple thumb of rule, the bigger area that you see on the lip, more or less that will determine how deep the crankbait will dive. The smaller bodied crankbaits, some of them, or usually they have a smaller lip, so that will also give you an indication that these ones are not going to dive too deep as compared to the one with the big lip. So just a simple rule of thumb and guideline. And last but not least is that I would say that crankbait also comes in I would say the profile is different. Some, like I said earlier, is like round. Some can have flat sides. Some even, I would say, even the shed looking is also classified as a crankbait. So in terms of shapes, the body profile, there is a few different types, and the action itself will be different. So that covers more or less the different kind of crankbait. The next thing that I will go into is about the tackle that you use for fishing crankbait. Let me just go through quickly about the reels. So basically, if you are using bait casters or even spinning reels, I think for fishing crankbait, you need to choose a lower gear ratio is much preferred, because the lower gear ratio gives you a little bit more power. Bearing in mind that especially if you're fishing those very deep diving crankbait, they offer a lot of resistance. And if you have like a high speed reels, you will find it very difficult and strenuous on your wrist to fish whole day with that. Of course, the high speed reel allows you to move the bait or the lure crankbait much faster, meaning that you cast out, you crank it back, is much faster. But the downside is that you need, because of the resistance of the crankbait, you need a lot of wrist power and stamina to do that. So for my personal experience, I prefer the lower gear ratio, especially if I'm fishing the deep diving crankbait. However, if I'm fishing those crankbait that offer less resistance, I will go for a higher gear ratio, especially if I'm fishing some fast flowing river or let's say if you're fishing on a boat and the boat is constantly moving, you need to throw and retrieve fast to cover more area, then a higher gear ratio is preferred. So my choice to try to cover both is usually a 6.3 gear ratio. That would be my choice. And of course, if I'm fishing the smaller crankbait, I might use a 7.1, 7.3 gear ratio. Of course, there's no right or wrong, but I would say that if you have a chance to try different gear ratio, you will notice the difference, especially if you are cranking the higher resistance kind of crankbait. So that is for the reel. As for the rod, I will recommend a rod that has a moderate action. Okay, that means is that fast and extra fast rod is not really recommended, especially those very deep diving crankbait, because that number one, when you have an extra fast and reeling in those deep diving crankbait which has a lot of resistance, is very strenuous on your wrist. It's very tiring. However, if you are fishing the smaller crankbaits or crankbaits that offer very little resistance, you can use a fast or extra fast action rod. In my opinion, I would prefer a fast action, even for the less resistance crankbait. And then if I'm fishing a very deep diving crankbait that offer more resistance, I will use a moderate fast action rod. There isn't, I would say, there's no secret in fishing a crankbait. Crankbait, I would say, is one of the easiest lure to use, in the sense that if you were to cast it out and you do a straight retrieve, the lure itself that is designed by the designers, different brands, depending on the shape, the profile, and the lip design, it will have action, and that alone will actually catch the fish. So one of the common mistakes is what I call a robotic retreat, which I feel is a common mistake, meaning that most people will just cast it out, the crankbait, and then they will just do a constant retrieve without much thinking. Just cast it out, constant retrieve, cast it out, constant retrieve. So this is a very common mistake. There's nothing wrong with constant retrieve. You still catch the fish, but what is even better as an angler is that you cast it out. You can do constant retrieve, but you try to change the speed. So in a way, it's not like constant, meaning that I will still retrieve steadily, but I will retrieve fast and slow, fast and slow, so that my lure will be like swimming and slowing down and picking up speed. So in a way that you makes the lure a little bit more erratic. So kind of like a changing of speed technique is much preferred when you are fishing the crankbait. The second technique that I like to share with you is what I call stop, go, and pause. Okay, I mean stop as in like when you're retrieving, you can actually stop. Okay, and then you pause for a while, and then you go. All right, so the sequence should be: when you're retrieving, you stop, you pause for a while, and then you go, and you continue to retrieve. Play around with these kind of techniques to find the kind of retrieve that the fish is interested for that very day. It's important that if you find a particular place or a fishy looking spot, a hole, be it a sunken tree or an outcrop of a rock, don't fish it, don't overlook it by just casting once or twice. It is good, especially when you're using crankbait, to make at least like 5, 6, even 10 casts at the particular spot. Because sometimes, especially when the fishing pressure is there, the fish are spooky or inactive, they may not want to eat. But what you want them to do is to react, what we call a reaction bite. So throwing once or twice sometimes doesn't get them angry or doesn't get their reaction. You might want to try 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times before that you move on to another spot or you make another cast at a different place. So when you see a particular sunken tree or particular fishing hole that you felt that there must be a fish there, don't just give it 1 to 2 casts. Give it more casts. Give it a little bit more time. So choosing the type of the crankbait that determines the depth is important. And why is it important? Because you want it to get, number one, you want the lure to get close to the strike zone. And something that I also find out is that I like, especially if I'm fishing in rocky areas, be it on a boat or on land, I want my crankbait to actually keep scraping the ground. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, number one is to create the commotion, create the vibration. On the other hand is that when you find rocky grounds, normally you will have, be it in fresh water or in salt water, you might have those prawns, you might have some crabs that will be staying and hiding in those small crevices in the rocks. And that is where the fish are interested to feed on. And especially like crabs, when they actually walk on the rock, and you know that the sound actually travels faster underwater, they actually make a lot of noise. So basically, I want my crankbait to scrape the ground to make the kind of noise, so that I will get the fish to think that this is a crab that they're interested in striking my crankbait. So the next time when you're out fishing, do give these techniques a go and share with me your fishing results. I will see you in my next video. Alright, bye bye.